Okay, so let's get a chance to learn a little bit about this environment and the different sort of boxes here that are going to form the interfaces for a variety of our data tasks. The very first thing that you're going to want to do is once you see this thing set up, you're going to end up seeing this giant box here on the left. You're going to see a smaller box on the right and then another box on the bottom right here. Each of these boxes is going to serve an important role as we go here, but there's actually a box missing. And so this is the first kind of lesson in setting up our RStudio environment is we want to actually go all the way up here to the very top left of the screen. We want to click this little blank piece of paper icon with the green plus and click that and then go ahead and select I want a new R script. And you'll see now that we actually end up opening up yet another box. So we have 4 boxes in our environment. Box 1, 2, 3, 4. As it turns out, we're actually going to be primarily looking at boxes 1 and 2, this top left box and the bottom left box, pretty much all the time when we're doing our work in RStudio. Okay, and so on this side is going to be where we write our code. Okay, we're going to be writing all of our code in this top left box. This is the console where we're going to be writing the code. And then down here in this box, this is going to be where we see results. So it's a pretty simple thing you could imagine, right? I'm going to talk to my data and tell it to do certain things in this box, and then an outcome is going to appear in this box. The top right box is where we will find our data. And so R is a programming environment that allows us to manipulate data. The first thing that we want to do is actually put something in here to manipulate. We can certainly do basics like math in the R console. We could figure out what 1 plus 1 is. We could figure out what 1 times 1 is. We could figure out what 1 divided by 2 is. And we could figure out what 10 to the 10th power is. We could do all these things. Before we bring in any data, I just want to show you how to run these operations. To run these operations, to get answers in our bottom box here, we can just go ahead and highlight the text that we're trying to get it to run. This is essentially telling RStudio, hey, see this little piece of text that I wrote down here? I'd like you to give me the answer as it pertains to this particular piece of information. I'll go over here and I'll select this icon here that says run. Okay, so you don't want to deal with source or any of these other buttons. Just hit the run button, and you'll see that it will give me an answer down here in the bottom left corner. So it shows you in blue text what you asked it to do, and then it will say here, look, I'm giving you an answer. You may see this other little 1 here in brackets. That's simply saying I'm giving you an answer that has exactly 1 element. It gives you, too much information, right? It gives you a little report on exactly how big the answer was. And in this case, the answer was only 1 element, and that element is the number 2. This one, 1 times 1, we can run that one. We can get, lo and behold, it can figure out multiplication as well. 1 divided by 2, we can run this one, and it'll, lo and behold, tell you that it is 0.5. It's going to default to decimal notation. Again, each one of these answers is only 1 element long. That's why you see these ones. 10 to the 10th power runs this. Look at that. It also defaults to scientific notation when it's reporting certain numbers. And so we'll see 1e to the plus 10. We could do 10 to the negative 10th power, perhaps. See what happens there. 1e to the negative 10, right? So just getting you used to the idea that it's going to use decimal and scientific notation when it's reporting math. So that's another piece to keep in mind. But regardless, I think that what we've learned here is that you can write stuff in here, you can run those pieces by highlighting them and clicking the button, and you're going to get answers out. So I encourage you, open up one of these documents, type in some commands, and then highlight them and let them run and see what happens. Also, I just want to mention, you can highlight all these things together and run them, and you'll see that it'll do all of them at the same time. So that's also a nice little shortcut. You can highlight multiple lines and run them together, and it'll give you all that output all at the same time. So we've established that this powerful R computing environment can do math. That's a really good first step. But again, now we want to bring in some data. So I'm going to go up here, I'm going to click Import Dataset, and you'll see that you've got a number of different options. I am going to select from Excel, because all of our data in the tutorial, all the data that we'll be working with, we'll be saving as basic Excel files. So I can just do that. I'm going to go up here. You can see that you can specify a file/URL here. I'm going to go over here and hit Browse so that I can find it in my file directory. Again, I'm using Windows. This is going to look slightly different, but pretty much the same on your Mac. And I've already got my folder specified. You might have to click through a number of different things here to be able to get to the folder you need to get to find this thing. But mine's already nicely in my Dropbox folder where it needs to be. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go into this online folder, and I'm going to open up a Microsoft Excel workbook. Here, I'll show you that that's what that is. It says Microsoft Excel worksheet. I'm going to open this up. It is a thing called tap list. And if you look at that document that we have for the module, you'll be able to see this exact same document, and you'll be able to follow some instructions to be able to manipulate it a little bit. We're going to talk more about that in our class discussion on Thursday, but for now, I just want you to get used to this idea that we could be bringing in this data set, and we can look at it. So this is what it looks like. We can see that it is generally R has found it, and it seems to be in good shape. We can click the import button, and we will see that this thing called tap list is now in our data environment. So as a default, it opens up like a picture of the data set. That's not something we actually need. We don't need this to be in our box here. You'll see that multiple windows, or this is like tabbed browsing kind of, like if you have Chrome or Firefox, it's got a tab here that just shows you a picture of the data. That's not very useful for us, and it's going to be increasingly not useful if we've got very large data sets. You can imagine with thousands of observations, it's like, why are you showing me this? So you can very safely just click this X button to get rid of that. And instead, we'll be left with our little worksheet where we're able to manipulate this thing. And so, as we'll see in some of these tutorials and some of these instructions, essentially what we're going to be doing in the entirety of our R Studio experience is we're going to be talking to this data, we're going to be giving it commands, and we're going to be showing essentially what happens to it in this bottom pane. So, for example, I could start with a very basic command. I'm going to use the head command, okay? And I'm going to say, I want to see the very first rows of this tap list. This is a very simple command. I'm just doing it to show you how to interact with something. I'm going to use the head command. The head command, within the parentheses, I'm going to type tap list. And you can see RStudio is already trying to help you out. It's saying, oh, did you mean tap list? And so you can sometimes just click that and it'll autofill for you. And if you were to, again, just like with the math notation, select this and hit run, you'll be able to see that it's done something. It's actually produced the first 6 rows of the data set that we needed. So I'm going to give you a lot more information. We're going to see a lot more videos in the future on how to manipulate like specific elements of this. Like, for example, maybe I wanted to know the mean of this price variable. You'll see that I've used the $ operator to talk to a specific column in this data. Again, if this doesn't make a lot of sense at the moment, don't worry, we're going to get a lot of practice with this. But you can see that I can mess with this and I can figure out some basic characteristics of this data set. Or maybe I want to see a table of all the different types of beer that are in this list. If it wasn't obvious at this point, we're dealing with a data set that has to do with beer. If I were to run this one, you can see that this produces a little table that counts up the number of each type of beer in our data set. So again, this is all about sort of summarizing and analyzing the data that's involved in this square, this flat rectangular data set with 32 different observations of 7 different variables. That's all we're essentially doing in this. And so you can see that it sounds like it's really complicated, that we're doing computer programming, but at the end of the day, we're essentially going to be taking an element that we already know about, that we've ingested into our environment, and we're going to be manipulating different pieces of it to get it to tell us sort of important factoids about the data that we have. So in the next video, I'm going to be showing you a lot more about sort of the powerful properties of this, and especially a specific package, that is how to install a specific package that will allow us to be much, much more effective and allow our code to be a lot cleaner than it is if we were simply just to leave it at this and use all the commands that are available to us in just the basic R environment. So we're going to do one more tweak to be able to get this up to sort of the best level possible. But before I do that, the last thing that I do, I want you to be very reflexive about this, is I'm going to be saving my work here. in this little worksheet. So you can see here that this thing is called Untitled1. Think about this as like a Word document. You basically have a Word document with all your commands in here. You're going to want to save that document by clicking this little save icon. You're going to save that thing in whichever folder is the one you're using, and you're going to want to make some kind of file name that makes sense to you. Okay, so I'm going to say 2021 spring worksheet 1. And if I save that document, it becomes a .r file, and that's a special file that only works with the R environment. And it allows me to then open this back up and remember all the commands that I've already typed. It's going to save us a tremendous amount of time in the future. So make sure that you've got your R documents, the .r file, which contains all the commands that you've run, saved in a folder where you know where it is, hopefully next to where your data is. So that the next time you open this back up, you can bring in your variables, you can bring in your commands, and you can go right back to where you left off. I hope this was informative. I know that you probably have many questions, and don't worry, we're going to answer all of them when we get together during our next meeting. So I'll see you very soon.